welcome to Your Real, Your Ideal podcast. How are you doing today, Sandy?
I am great. I am in
Good,
sunny
good.
Durango, and you'll hear the birds chirping in the background, and that's about it right now. So it's good.
Lovely, lovely.
How about
I
you,
am
Amy?
I'm doing good. I'm in Omaha. It's beautiful. It's my birthday month. I love August because it's my birthday month and it's still summer before fall. So I'm Amy Tokus. My birthday is in August. So there you go. and um, coming from Omaha, Nebraska, co-host of Your Real, Your Ideal with Sandy. Sandy, do you want to?
Sandy Lane, the other co-host, and my birthday is in September. So my birthday month is
Oh,
September, and I always loved a September birthday because I was able to have one of the first birthday parties of the year after we went back
oh
to
yeah.
school, and typically the weather's always been nice. So
Yeah.
we'll celebrate you this month, Amy, and then I'll take over the month of September.
Hey, I know. I'm all about celebrating all month. so, and then I love it because it's still summer and then I go into fall and it's like,
Right.
oh, it's kind of like this end of the summer type of feeling. So August is great. All right. So we're doing this podcast. We're having a great time. We've had some really good topics so far talking about life script model, the new normal of everything going on, and our perspective is a couple of women who I was telling a group I had dinner with the other night. I'm like, they were asking about the podcast. I'm like, you guys are the target audience. It's this group of women who are trying to do everything, trying to, but find that balance and having some of those big conversations.
hmm And I get back to, I'm in Durango now and had been in Omaha for 30 years. And I had my group of friends that I would say we would solve life's problems.
Yeah.
We would talk about whether it be world issues. And our whole thought was, how do we bolster each other up and make good decisions on making our quality of life and others better? And I really miss that. And
Yeah.
these conversations and the whole Zoom platform of being able to be in two different places, look at each other, have a great conversation has been a great replacement. It's made me think. Uh, Again, I like it that we never have it figured out, but we talk
Yeah.
it through, and I always feel better coming out of the conversations and getting feedback from people who've listened and said,
Right,
hey,
right, right.
this has been my life experience, or here's another
Mhm.
thing to think about. But perspective is everything, and every day is adding new perspective.
Yeah, last time we talked about should I say or should I know? And it
Mhm.
was about, do we speak up and say stuff or do we just, you know, uh, not try to fight the fight,
Right.
and create that tension. We'll just try to play it down so that so anyway, it was very, a great conversation. And I do remember at the end of us, you said, well, did we come up with an answer? And I was like, no, but I do feel better about everything. and kind of, reasons why you would say something and reasons why you might pass. And it's
And
okay.
And you know what my big takeaway was is you shouldn't be extreme either way. Like I find
Right.
myself sometimes thinking, oh, I need to always respond, or I'm just going to be quiet. And there is an in between. And you have to
Right.
critically think and decide when you should say and when you should know.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A little practice
Very
has
good
helped
point.
since our last conversation. I feel
Right.
good about it.
Yes, I know exactly. I've been very aware in the conversations these days. Okay, it was good. Okay, so today I'm excited. We're talking about the happiness factor, which is your passion project, which
It is
is,
so my passion project.
I know, so I'm so excited to hear about it, to learn about it, and yeah, tell me more, Sandy.
Okay, well, there's always a story. And as anybody
I
knows
love
me,
the
there's
stories.
always a story. My mother calls me the
Yes,
master storyteller. I'm going to take it as a compliment. But she is
that is
having
good.
me write the family book. So I think that's a good thing that she says that. And the stories are true as how I remember them. How about that? So to the best
Yeah.
of my knowledge, my authentic me. So there is
Right.
a story about the happiness factor, and it starts with a friend of Garrett's named Craig. And 11 years ago, I think we're coming on 11 years now, is when Garrett, my husband, and I both we were right at the same time finishing up our divorces, our first marriages. A lot of similar circumstances, kids about the same age, kids going to Catholic school. Neither one of us really had planned on this, back to the life script model. And I tell you, we were both a little bit upside down because it wasn't the model that we had planned to follow, but it's where we ended up. At the time, 11 years ago, Garrett was just like anybody, and I'm going to use post-divorce, post-relationship, you're confused, you're unhappy,
Right.
you're trying to figure it out. Craig, his friend, had a home. He lived in St. George, Utah, but he worked in Denver for the week. So he lived with Garrett during the week. Okay. And he was a very
Okay.
good friend to Garrett. And he came up with this, you know how when you're not happy, so when you're unhappy and you spin and spin, or you'll take a thing. It's so easy to dissect and say, oh, I hate my job. And you go on and on and on. Or, you know, it's all about my ex-husband, my ex-girlfriend. You can pick something and you can just talk and talk and talk in circles. We've all done it.
Right.
Craig, I thought this was just brilliant, would ask Garrett to start once the kids were in bed and they were sitting down, he'd say, what's your happiness factor? Scale from 1 to 10, not in the moment. So when you ask about the happiness factor, it's that however you do that part of that piece of time, that time period, how are you feeling overall, your happiness factor 1 for 10. He would always start the conversation with that. And Garrett would say, I'm a 5. Okay. And they'd start unpacking it. Why are you a 5? And that would start the conversation. And it was a great technique because rather than Garrett, you know, just kind of lamenting on maybe what happened with the divorce attorney that day, how he ran into a parent, you know, he instead would start with, I'm a 5, and why is that? And then Craig would challenge him and say, and how do you make that better? What steps can you take to make that better? So that's where the story started.
Wow.
And I thought it was brilliant.
I love that.
And
I love the how do you make things better?
how do you make things better? And so they would
You-
talk through strategies. And keep in mind with strategies at that point in time, he was block and tackling. You know, there's points in your life where you can take huge steps, and there's points in your life where you're just surviving day by day. So
Right.
at that time in his life, it was a great, how do we improve that? How do we make it better? So Garrett started using this with me. And when we would have date nights, and back then, you know, things were different. Well, we were managing 2 homes, but when we went out to dinner together, that was always the start of our conversation. What's your happiness factor? And that led to our conversation over that night of dinner, that night of drinks, and we would unpack it with each other on why one was high, why one was low, and then we would talk through what are we going to take to make that better. And that was just, it was the happiness factor became part of our relationship, and how one thing that we enjoyed talking about, because it was a very proactive way to help each other out and lift each other up. So
Right.
it became a common conversation that we had with each other. It was part of our dialogue. So how did the happiness factor become my passion project? So fast forward, okay, and it will be a year and a half ago now. So January 1st of 2019, Garrett and I picked up and moved to Boise, Idaho. We purely moved for quality of life. My youngest had graduated, his kids were out of the house, and we were both, he had always said, Garrett's a person that we had many conversations that struggled with, would it bring us happiness to move somewhere else? He was under the impression, or he would constantly emphasize that he needed to be by mountains. It was all about the surroundings. I'm a person who's bloom where you're planted. It's about the relationships. And I did a lot of hand wringing over, how can I leave all these friends from Omaha I've had for 30
Right.
years? How can I leave? I have a son here. I have history here. I, I'm going to be working remotely. It's impossible for me to be happy, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to try, but I was struggling with, how would I ever be as happy as I was in Omaha, because of the relationships, the people, and I didn't need bloom where you are planted. I used to say this to him. I'm like, we could move to Fargo, North Dakota, and if we were together, I'd figure it out. And so then I tried to tell myself that philosophy. Okay, so you know what, bloom where you're planted, but I really thought I would be having to work really hard. So this is what happened. We moved to Boise, and I'm telling you, it was a very joyful year for me, incredibly joyful year. And I had fun. I met people. I mean, in fact, to the point that it was even more so a joyful year for me than Garrett for different points. And that's where I started researching happiness, saying, you know what, what is it like? And we would talk about our happiness factor, and mine was very high, and his was lower. Okay, he was probably about the same.
Yeah.
Okay,
So he stayed
he
steady
stayed the same, and
and yours had gone up, which
mine
you
had
had
gone
not
up.
expected that,
We thought it
right?
was
You
going
had
to be the
expected,
opposite.
yeah.
We had totally expected it to be the opposite. And I will tell you, every time I tell people here I was in Boise, I'm like, oh, it was so much. It was awesome. And what made it that? And so that's where
Yeah.
my journey on starting researching, writing a book about it, but really breaking it down. And even within workshops and working with people in my professional life, this factor, and I came down to, after I broke it down and I would go back, I went back in my life and in Garrett's and people I know the most, my kids, and saying, what were the happiest moments? What were the most unhappy, and what contributed to that? And what came with that, back to what is your happiness factor, is I really believe there's an equation, of course, it's a deeper dive to get into it, but there's a baseline equation that
Yep.
equates to happiness. And if you use your self-awareness and monitor, where am I at, and try to break it down, whether it's block and tackling or bigger decisions, that's how you can manage and make it better. And me and Garrett and how we ended up, most of the time with happiness for people, it happens accidentally. Okay, you're doing all the right things, but they just kind of come together in the right way. And
Right.
it's not it comes by accident, but there's a factor that follows that. So that's the story behind the happiness factor. And then the research, so I would tell you, it's probably been a year and a half that I have been back to breaking it down, working through workshops, through real life examples, and helping people, whether they be my direct family, myself, and applying that formula to help people break down and look at and make continuous improvements on how to bring their happiness higher. And it's funny because my husband have said, we'll go on hikes, and I'll say, okay, here's some, have you ever thought about this? And we got to keep this in mind. And he said, it's kind of, I'm going to say typical guy. He said, happiness just kind of sounds cheesy. Maybe it should be well-being. And and what's funny is he was all over the happiness factor before, but it can come across a smiley face.
Mm-hmm.
But here's
very,
the reality.
very touchy-feely, very
right.
feminine.
So I thought through this
feminine.
because my background's business, and I'm like, I don't want it to be cheesy. And so I really thought through that. But two things came to mind is when it comes to the individual, okay, and back to doing more research, success versus happiness, leadership, there's all these keywords, right? And to me, it was, what do they really mean? I'm not going to do something to make it sellable. What is the right word? And when I come down to it, back to happiness factor, that is 100% individual. And did anybody say, please give me an unhappy life? Okay, please, everybody, what is one thing everybody wants to have? They want happiness for themselves. They want it for their kids. Okay.
Right. As
teams, success. Okay. You're doing a goal together. You're trying to achieve a mission. So I always say I talk about the success factor and the happiness factor. The happiness factor is individual. It's a state of being. Success is a state of doing. So if you're with your group with Freshly Organized and you want to build a culture of authenticity and you have 5 goals for next year, you're going to use a lot of the same things in this formula we're going to talk about, but you're doing it to achieve a mission and you're going after a goal. It's a state of doing, trying to get to that goal, but you have to understand the underlying factors of each individual. They have to have the self-awareness of what they bring to the table.
Right. Yes.
So so even if, back to the happiness factor, I'll go through what that is, but the bigger point here is you don't have to, being aware of where you're at, you can use a lot of tools. You know, the Wheel of Life. Are you familiar with the Wheel of Life?
No.
Look at a wheel. It has a pie.
Oh, the wheel.
Yeah,
I thought
wheel.
You meant WILL.
Oh, sorry.
The wheel.
Well, the wheel. And you put like where you're at for each one.
Yeah.
It's a great tool, but I'll never forget. I had a person I was coaching, and she said, so if you looked at her wheel, her health was a 5, and she said, I don't really like to sweat. I really don't want to. I'm perfectly fine the way I am. And my point in all that is not everything has the same intensity. So usually some things are more important than others. So it's a good tool, but starting with that, don't look at this and don't overthink it. Just where are you at today? And then unpacking it on where do you think, why is it that, and how do you make it better is a great conversation to have with anybody that you're talking to that is either somebody that's very happy, to unpack it with them on what brings you there. What do you see as those contributing factors versus why it's lower too?
So does perspective have anything to do with this? Because like there's some people who you look at their circumstances and the stuff they're going through and you're like, oh my gosh, they're going through such a hard time. And yet they might say they have this really high happiness factor. And then and I know we don't know really but just externally, you can see what's going on. Right. And then there might be the opposite of, you might even yourself be like, everything looks really good, but my perspective is I'm not finding that happiness. So does that have to do a little bit with your equation?
It does. So there's 2 things.
Okay, good.
The first one is everyone is very unique and have a different baseline. So I'm going to use Garrett and I as an example, just to keep carrying this out.
I'm taking notes as you see me looking down. I'm like, great. So,
remember how I've said, and I don't remember, maybe I brought it up twice, that my mother says I'm a Pollyanna.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm a positive person. So I'm going to use the term baseline. My baseline is higher. I tend to be, it's just part of my making. Garrett's baseline is lower. He's harder on himself. He looks at the world a little bit differently. So I tell you one thing, all these years, if Garrett is what I'd say baseline on being generally happy, like things are pretty good, I am an 8, okay? If things are really good, I'm a 9, but I'm never going to say I'm a 10, right? But I'm up there. I'm that, if I say I'm lower than an 8, he's like, whoo, what's going on, okay? If Garrett is almost never an 8, his baseline is probably a 7, 6.5 to a 7. And I know that about him, okay? Right. And so part of it is people do have different baselines. My brother, I've got 2 brothers. One, everything is good. Like we'll tell the same story and one will focus on the things that didn't go 100% right, the things that need to be improved on. And the other one is, that's the best trip. It's just the perspective, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. You could argue that she's a Pollyanna, he's negative. It's your human wiring. And they talked about this a little bit in the book Homo Sapiens, which is very much a scientific book about humans. They have a whole chapter on happiness, which is actually, it was very, very, I need to go back and read it again. It was great research. And they talked about just, let's be real with things. mental illness. There are, I think, what is the statistics? 35% have some form. We all have a little bit of something, I say. We do,
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah.
And that does impact that.
We all have a little crazy.
Right. We do. It's real.
Right.
And I love it that it's more accepted now and not a stigma.
Oh yeah, me too.
There's methods, there's ways, but that does impact the happiness factor. That is real. So, whether it's medication, whether it's other therapy, people are each individual and they have different baselines. So because that table of women that you were with, if you went around the table and they all gave a number, the reality is if you kept asking each other that from month to month, what you'd find is that there weren't generally more higher or lower. They're just different. You can only self-assess yourself, right? And then the second thing that has to do with when you talked about, so that's more internal, right?
Okay.
The other thing are those external, those non-controllables, okay? People can argue and say, well, they're kind of controllable. Let's just put them in the bucket of they're pretty much, majority are out of your control. Maybe
like the external things that are happening to you.
Some things you have no control over.
Right.
Your genetics. You have no control over, the pandemic. People could argue your health, you do. Some things you do, some things you don't, or you can't change it because it's in the past. Baggage falls in there, okay? You can't change the past. Garrett and I both carry baggage from our first marriages that will never go away. It doesn't make it right or wrong, but it's there. And so do a visual of, pretend I have a whiteboard and I'm drawing this equation for you. And I'm just going to say what the equation is. It's value times action equals happiness. Okay, so picture the teacher writing this on the whiteboard. Okay, but then what I want you to picture is,
I just wrote it on here.
You wrote it there. It goes a little bit deeper, but that's the general equation.
Okay.
Now what I want you to picture is all of a sudden, all around it, there's all these different things that are coming at it, like arrows or clouds, or that's all that other stuff. Okay, that's the uncontrollables, like the dog coming in next to me and whining because he wants to walk. But those are all the uncontrollables in your life, and it's how you respond to them. So you're constantly focusing on what you can control, and it totally impacts your happiness factor, because some people get dumped on and some people don't, and some days are better. But you have to recognize that, and back to where you are today. Think about Craig's conversation with Garrett 11 years ago. He was probably a 3 or a 4, right? How are we going to, and so talking through that, he was also talking past the uncontrollables. You have to go through, you're going to have to pay the attorney. You're going to have to run into people who don't know the shame, all those things were these clouds and lightning bolts and arrows coming. And some of those things are good things too. You were born of a family that you have a trust fund, so money's never an issue. Okay. It's how you handle it, because that could be good, that could be bad, right? It's recognizing all those things. The focus is on what you can control, and it's accepting what's coming in and recognizing the other side and how it impacts that, and being able to recognizing those factors, and then constantly going back and looking at, what do I need to do? What is my value? Okay, and we're going to get the values more than V, so you got to add one more thing to your equation. Action and happiness stay the same, so picture a math equation, but we're going to get into, they always say art and science meet, okay, math and English meet here a little bit. We got the math equation. Value actually has 3.
So just going to say, I'm good at the math. Right. When we start throwing English in there, I might get a little like, okay, what are we talking about?
The English actually translates to math, because the English is, so value is more than value. Okay, here's math. It's value to the 3rd degree. It's value cubed. Okay, and what's great about something that's cubed is the number is, correct me if I'm saying it wrong because I'm more English than math. Well, I shouldn't say that because of my finance background, but exponential, what's the word for, say the word for
exponential.
Me. Exponential. Yeah. So think about how, so if value is cubed, the more you focus on the value components, the bigger impact on the happiness.
Happiness.
Okay.
Nice.
So
Okay.
the value
Values
components,
cubed.
value cubed, it's value, values, and valued. Okay. We got a little bit of everything in there. Here's my English. We got a noun, an adjective, and a verb, right? But core values.
Love that. I'm like writing it down and I'm totally getting it. Okay.
And this is what
Keep
people
talking.
get wrong. This is what people get wrong in the happiness factor, or they don't realize they're doing it and they do it by accident because everybody focuses on the action or what they think is going to bring them happiness. Okay. So I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to move. I'm going to find it, but they never deep dive into the value, the V cubed. Okay. So you have the values cubed is values are your core values. You really have to deep dive in what are your core values, and we all have them. Okay. You have to understand they're your non-negotiables in life. They're
Right.
your values, they're universal. Even though beliefs, background, they impact values, values really are a part of your being and you see as your universal world. Okay. And I call those the non-negotiables because most anybody, if you're not sticking to your core values, you're not, that is going to have a reverse effect on that happiness. Okay.
Right. Right.
So but that's kind of touchy-feely because people are like, oh gosh, do the values exercise here. You know, how do I apply that? But
Yeah.
it's really the other two things. Back to I have my core values and you have yours. Okay. It's understanding those, understanding your non-negotiables, those things. And a lot of that is unpacking your past because you'll figure out that a bad situation or when you were truly unhappy is a lot of times it goes back to the V's. It's either a big one is you're going against your core values. Something is just not settling with you. You just know in your gut, that's a gut thing, that something's not right.
Right. So it's not only knowing them, it's honoring them and respecting your core values and making sure that they're, yes. Okay.
And knowing that you can't, and so the other two V's are very important because it's being valued and also valuing others. I always say that the being valued is you can have your core values. You can say, I'm going to use an example, easy one, work. Okay. Something is one of my core values is integrity. Okay. So I'll use this as an example for the three V's. Okay. The three values. One of my core values is integrity. There is no, back to our, I'm honest to a fault. Like I have no problem back to telling the world or what have you. So it is a huge value for me. And I had a business partner who lied all the time. And we would go into meetings and it was in a sales function. He was trying to sell to people and we'd leave. And I mean, when I say lies, like he'd make up numbers. He'd take something I said. I mean, he'd say authored books, you know, it was just crazy. And he would tell me, I would back to, you got to bring things up, you know, you can't just be back to action. So my action was, hey, you know, that wasn't true. And his answer was, that's called ham and egging it. That's what you do as salespeople. You don't tell them the truth. That's just part of the business world. You just don't get it. That's, you know, you have your personal word in the business world. And I tell you, a lot of people were fine with that. That doesn't make them bad people, but the fact that this was a core value of mine, it just grated on me. Back to being valued, he didn't care that was a value of, he kept on doing it. So back to the action, you can say, I want out of this job because they don't value me or they, it's against my core values. You got to take some action to try to correct it because humans are humans. And this is a pretty black and white one because who likes a liar, right? But at the end of the day, I was miserable. And if I really went back to it, my misery went to tugging on that and a couple other core values that were never going to be aligned. And he didn't value me enough to recognize those, to talk it through, to say, okay, and it's just not a value. I think I've made this comment before. Don't say because you have a value and integrity being one, him lying, that's not that he has a different value, that's a human character flaw, right? And we all have
Right.
flaws in character. So that doesn't mean he has a different value. That means he's not honoring something that's very, very important to me, and that's a non-negotiable. And then back
Yeah.
to the other part of value is you have to value others, because I often say life is not a solo sport. So you can have all these things. Here are my core values. Here's what I need. But your function, every part of our life, we're functioning with other people and valuing them, and work. You have to value others and understand their differences and do the same back to them. And there's a whole exponential value to that, because the more you do that and don't only focus on yourself, the more you're helping people figure out their happiness factor. Because think about that, you've just added to valuing them. So there's
Right.
a big effect to that. But those three values, it's not, I like the valuing others, appreciate, and I think in our world right now, we're not doing that enough. That's part of this unhappiness of the political
Right.
state, is we're not, there are beliefs are different than values, but we're not valuing others. We're all standing in our circle of, here's what's important to me and you don't get it. Back to what you,
Right.
should I say or should I know?
Yeah, it's interesting. This group of women I was sitting with, there was a discussion about stuff going on right now, and somebody was very firm about, uh, you know, business is about relationships, and people need to be face to face, and this has got to change. And just a very firm. And someone in the group was like, everybody's going to be different, and you have to value everybody, because some people aren't going to want to be face to face, and they can have relationships like this, like you and
Right.
we are not face to face, but we're still, cultivating a relationship and working well. And we probably, I don't know when we'll be face to face again.
Right.
Who knows? But this valuing others and being open-minded, I love this idea, because then you're also trying to find the good in people and what works for people, and identifying that everybody's different in this situation. And I think that really does raise your happiness factor, because I will say the people who are like, everybody's different and everybody will find what works for them. And there's, they felt more optimistic, I would say, about the whole, future of what's happening in the pandemic, versus somebody who was like, this is the way it needs to be. So, I think it's, yeah.
And it's not only valuing for, don't get caught up in, you're not valuing somebody for their core values, you're valuing them for their experience, for their skills, their talents. And that even goes to, how do I want to be valued? Core values are part of it, but with you bring other things to the table, and you want to be valued for those unique skill sets. And everybody is different, and they actually play into that action item. The action item that I use a lot of times is using strengths training, and how best can you get the job done. Values, what your values are, plus skills and experience, they all kind of build up to that action item. And so those are great tools but you have to unravel the why. And I always say, the words I use is, the values piece is the why. Why? That's my why, my values, and my why gets built on my life journey and my experiences, and wanting to be valued for that, valuing others for what they bring to the table and what their why is. The action is the how, and the happiness, that thing that's bringing it, is the what. So back to, I find that people really focus, they go straight for the what. So it's like our talk about, I'll have what she's having. Oh, Sandy's really happy. I can tell she's really happy. So I need to move. I need to get a different husband. And and so they go right for the what,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And then I hear, I can't do what you're doing because I have grandkids, or they give all the reasons why they can't do what I'm doing. So thus they're going to stay at a 5 for the rest of their life. And it's like, no,
Right.
you gotta unwind, and it takes time, because back to that why, a great exercise for the why, and my starting point with anyone, and if it's a team at work, I'll say, what's your best work experience? List your 3 best, 3 worst, and then unwind the whys. And you'll always go back to the 3 V's. You always go back to core values, being valued, valuing others, understanding what people bring to the table. It's never, not never. Yes, absolutely. Execution of the what can be part of it, but there's always some why that's intertwined in there for both the happiest, the best outcomes, and the worst.
Yeah, and there's a lot of respect in this, about respect for others and respect for yourself and your core values, and others respecting you. So it's tied in there.
And I do see people get caught up too much in the when something happens, especially if it's a bad situation, it's easier to do the valuing others when it's a good situation that you're extremely happy. That tends to be an outcome of that, because, hey, I'm good, and you spread the joy. But I find that people tend to only look at, back to that math problem, they only look at maybe their core values and how they're wronged, and they don't focus on bringing forward what people can value. They're so caught up in themselves. That doesn't help that factor at all, because it doesn't, first of all, it's a low number, and you can do all kinds of action, but people, we don't live in a world, there's actually, it's impossible for life to be a solo sport, because no matter what, you're going to be born to someone, and it's very rare that you encounter no one. And even when you die, there are people you're going to meet along the way.
There's going to be people along the way.
It's not a solo sport, and recognizing that and understanding the impact with each other is a huge thing. It's probably the biggest, I get back to the value is what people miss. The power of value is another thing I talk about a lot. It's that is the missing link, or the ignored link, that really brings out, it brings out a constant state of higher happiness in my mind, because when it isn't by accident and it's intentional, and intentional means you're not going to every time think through, where am I right now? What do I need to do? But we are humans, and it's routine and habits. And so habitually stopping yourself when you're having a bad day or things, or making yourself reflect nightly on what's my happiness factor, is going to bring out a more constant state of happiness and of good and of helping each other. So it's a good exercise to constantly work on for yourself.
Right. So if you are somebody who kind of dwells on the bad stuff, though, this would be my question. Like, so in the evening, you're unpacking and your happiness factors at a 3, and every night you're like, I'm at a 3. Everything's going wrong. I'm at a 3. I'm at a 3. How do you get out of that cycle? Like, if you don't have somebody there to help talk you through it and help you, or does that make sense?
Yeah,
Is that
I think you almost have to, it's good to find somebody, but not necessarily, because again, it's no matter what, it is individual, because it's your state of being, right?
Right.
But I think the way to do it is just maybe acknowledge that the baseline's lower, but unpack it with, okay, what are the 3 steps I need to unpack, why it's the 3, okay? Because you can constantly complain, but what I'm hearing is, or what I'm thinking is, that back to, sorry, I made a noise here.
you know what? I've been
I
making noise too, so I apologize.
But back to being the 3, you have to take action. Okay, so now maybe you've unpacked it,
Okay.
you know the why, you have to take action. So maybe the what I would say if I was coaching that person is write 3 things down that will help your situation. Okay, here you know your why, you know what's you know what's missing there. Okay,
Yeah.
and maybe you even know back to a specific situation. Here's how I want it to be better, right?
Right.
But now what's your action point? List them out. Don't do a Sandy Lane move, and excuse me for the nose. A
That's
Sandy
okay.
Lane move would be to list 20 things out because that's what I do. Let's list 20 unrealistic things that I can't get to in a month.
Right,
So
right.
the three, the
You
rule
are
of
not alone in that.
yeah. So pick 3 things, and that's
Yeah.
back to the challenge of the date nights. It's like, what are you going to do about it? And we're going to move in 4 years. Okay, that's great. You know, we're going
And
to
those
move for 4 years. What are
actions,
we going to do in the meantime?
right. And those actions would be specific things that you can control, right?
Yes,
Like
the
you're
controllables.
not
You're
gonna,
taking into account the uncontrollables.
right. Yeah. You can't say, well, I need the sun will be shining and then it's
Right.
storming and you can't blame your action on the weather. It's so those actions have to be things that you can actually do and control.
And that you
I
can
like that.
complete. There's another thing I'll give you and I don't want to underestimate the action either, because, and I'm not going to name the child, but I have one son that's a big thinker. Think, 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 and he doesn't
Yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
act. And if the more
Yeah.
uncontrollables that are hitting him, the more he thinks and stays up and worries, and the less he acts.
Right.
That's his natural.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there is a saying that I will say to him, and I think about a lot: an inert object does not move. Okay. So you
Right.
can, if you turn into a rock, there is 0 chance you're going to move. Even if you're a turtle, at least
Yeah.
you're moving. Okay. You got to move. And so,
Right. And when you get overwhelmed like that,
right,
it's paralyzing. You just start
paralyzing.
shutting down. And so yes.
But part of that's knowing yourself. And once
Yes.
you know back to the whys and the values and how you're wired, there's a whole DNA. Like I always say, you have to understand your DNA and accept those things that, okay, here is back to the how. The how is not that easy because you have to come out with the best how, what works for you, and acknowledge how you're wired and how you get past that line. So for him, he knows I got to do something. And and for me to say, do
Right.
these 10 things in one day, because I'll overwhelm him with my 10 things, right? And letting him decide
Right.
what's the one thing or what can I do, and he'll do that. I have another kid who's more like me that he'll pick 10 things and he might never complete any of them. But he has these great ideas, or he'll go straight to action, but he takes on too many things, right? And once he takes on too many things, he
Right.
doesn't get anything done. So that's no better than the inert object because the motion didn't get him anywhere either.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, this is good because so I'm kind of a higher level Pollyanna, I would
Right.
say. And in the evening, when I think through my days, I go back to that old process of gratitude. What are the good things that happened today? What am I
Right.
thankful for? And so I usually finish my day feeling pretty good, but I know that there are people that are stuck under overwhelmed and have things bogging them down that aren't quite there. So
Or
I
keep
like
trying
I
the
like that action piece of it because then if you are in that position, you can say, okay, what are the things that I can do to get out of this funk?
you want to do the right action and be heading for the right thing. Or
Yeah.
even if you don't know what you're headed for, it's if you I tell you, really breaking down that why and saying, what are my core values? And there's a lot of different ways to get to those, but what are those non-negotiables in my life? And a great way to come up with that is to really think through the good and the bad and think through your life. I mean, go back to there's easy things, even things that bring you joy and happiness. If you go back and think through when you were a child, and this is before you had to have a job, I think about me and my brothers. What would we go to with that day off of school because of a snow day? What was our play
Right.
like when we had free days? That will uncover a lot about some of your core values, one things that make you
Right.
joyful, because you're only going to choose those things and you don't have those other things in the way. One of my values,
Right.
one of my top values is fun. And I remember the first time Garrett's like, how can you have a value of fun? Amy, it's really important to me. Whether it's
Yeah.
taking, I really like to have, you could put spontaneity with it. I mean, there's having joy, and finding joy in every day. If I am just working to the hill,
Mhm.
not having spontaneous moments to meet new people, to have adventures. I mean, I can find an adventure walking the dog, but fun and adventure is really important to me. Might not be
Yeah.
really important to somebody else. And almost always, if I look at the happiest moments, I have, whether it be time in my life or I'm taking the time to make sure I'm finding the fun and enjoyment of every day. But
Right.
that's not on Garrett's list.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
Yeah. So you're talking about snow days. I'm going to tell you a story about when you were talking about this happiness factor, and I was like, oh my gosh, I remember back, I'm going to say 2006ish, or I don't know. We moved to Omaha in 98.
Okay.
And from 98 until through 2007, every February. So I'm from Arkansas. That's where I grew up.
Okay.
So Omaha, different weather, not environment, like weather is what I'm talking about. So every February, I was planning on moving. I'm moving somewhere south because in Omaha, we've made it through January,
We got through the
and
holidays, kind of fun.
I know and the holidays are over. January gets cold, and then February, you're like in the thick of it.
Right.
It's
You're
like
done.
done. I was done. So I started noticing this pattern. Every February, I'm looking for houses and I'm planning to move back to the South. And so at this time, I was staying at home with my kids and had little kids. So lots of stuff going on in the house, but pretty kind of isolated in the house. And in February, we weren't getting out a lot because, of course, the weather's bad. And Tom was working and he had connections like in Atlanta and in Houston. And so those were two of the
We
places
look
that
for houses.
I'm house shopping and I am like planning the move. I'm like, honey, we're transferring, we're out of here. And then I know we're done. And so this happened all the way through 97. And, Tom was very sweet because he was like, it's that time of the year again, we're
Right.
moving. And so, but it changed in 2008. I don't think I even noticed when it changed, but a few years like 2010, 11, I was like, wow, I'm making it through the year here in Omaha without planning a move. And what's happened? What's changed? And so as you were talking through, I was thinking about this prior to our conversation and
Great. I love
and
that.
then when you were talking through your equation, um, I think I know what changed. And it has to do with my happiness factor because although I was very happy staying home, I had been a career person and I had these goals and staying home with my kids was very important to me, but I had set aside a lot of stuff and to do that. And in 2008, I started my business and I found something where I was doing something I loved and I was valued. And not that I wasn't valued prior to that. I wouldn't say that because I feel like I was, but there was more. I wanted more and there was more external value And that
You're
was
living more of your core values and being
right. And that adventure piece is part of it. Like I love to try new things. I like to do things a little out of the box like this, like, so, but I don't feel like, anyway, my happiness factor went up and I haven't looked for a house outside of
you
Omaha.
were looking
We've,
for the what, thinking
right.
you were chasing the what, and the
Yeah.
action was moving because that would increase the happiness factor. And
Right.
not by accident, but I mean, you didn't think through, I need to, you were deliberate, but it really fell into, you figured out the why. And what is my
What?
why? What do I
Right.
bring to the table? And I'm going to launch out. And it had an exponential impact on your happiness factor.
Completely. Completely. And come to find out, uh, the winters aren't that bad.
Right.
It's just uh, my perspective completely changed.
So one quick story, and I'm sure we're running out of time, but I think this, back to, how are we doing? We're about done?
Uh, yeah,
Okay.
you know what? I need a timer on
I
here
know
because
when I do
sometimes
this
I
recording,
forget
it doesn't
to,
say.
we do a little chatting and then I'm like, what time do we start? But yes, I'm sure we're running,
Okay, one more
we're
quick
running along.
story.
Yeah.
Back to being valued and people really getting you. And this is, again, there's one thing if it's a partnership or you impact all people, but
Yeah.
then there's people in your inner circle. And is there any deeper appreciation than being valued for who you are, and even kind of understanding it's a different way of acknowledging core values. Garrett is, a lot of his core values are on self-improvement, humanity. Mine are more relationship, adventure, and humanity too.
Yeah.
But when Garrett and I were getting married, I had a good friend of mine, Patty, had a shower for us. And she even did the little games, which was fun because, second marriage, we're in our
Right.
40s.
Yeah.
And she called both of us, and you ask everybody, kind of like a newlywed game, but instead she asked the people questions. And I'll never forget this. She said, what was it? She asked Garrett, and this came at the party, and she said it kind of made her verklempt because how quickly he responded and how she could just, feel it from him. She said, what attracts you most to Sandy, or what attracted you to Sandy? And without any hesitation, he said, her spirit. And but that complements, think about the fun, the adventure,
Right.
it
Right.
wasn't, it was her spirit. And when
Right.
she
It's the
asked me,
all of her core values
that
and
was like,
her
you couldn't have
energy.
summed up
Oh my
enough how
gosh.
much he got me and how much he valued me for that bit of a, I don't know if it's frivolous, but that, and then mine with him without hesitation was his integrity. And which was not only one of my core values, but that was the biggest, both of us, it was like the best compliment we could give to each other. And there aren't
Right.
are those typical things people say about the other, so often
Right.
people, I don't know whether
Their smile or
right.
yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll never forget that. And no matter what, I think about Garrett saying without any hesitation, her spirit. And with me saying he's a man of integrity, and he
Right.
holds that value very high. And if people question his integrity, some people wouldn't think twice about it. Not saying that's bad, but that's a value thing to him, right? So anyway, that's my
Right.
story.
And that you can be, yeah, and that you can be your real self and be valued.
Right. And that
And
we're all different.
it was identified, and I love that. Oh, sweet. What a
That's,
good story.
anyway, last story of the day.
Yeah. Last story of the day. All right. How are questions? Okay. How do you help your children shift from getting value from other people's opinions to finding value within? So this is the putting too much weight on feeling valued by others. Maybe it's not V cubed. It's that V, that one V has more value than their core values or
Don't you
how they
think,
value
or
others.
I think too, it's the older we get, the more life experiences we have, and the more we understand. the whole value factor, what our values are, because we've had more life experiences.
Yeah.
Don't you think that too, especially, I'm thinking of our young adult children, that
Right.
they're being told what values, how they should be valued because they don't know much better. So they're trying to fall into kind of the life script model, or this is what that needs to look like. I think it's to ask them those questions, whether it be a work or relationship, and help them try to unpack that in themselves about what their values are. I think millennials are actually pretty good at this,
Yeah.
but unpacking that, their self value and what they bring to the table and how they can value others. It's really a parenting thing, and helping them learn, use their life experiences as they go and their encounters to try to better understand what they bring rather than having somebody describe it for them.
Right. And I agree. I don't think this is something that um, is going to come out of the gate, like finding this balance in the V's. Because if all of these V's are equal, because there's three V's, they represent different things, but we're going to assume that they all have the same weight. Um, I don't think that comes naturally for some people. Some people are going to value what they think about themselves, their core values more at certain, and it could be by situation. But I do think as you age and mature, they come together more so, and you start to see that they're equal,
Right.
and they're to find that balance. But I do like your example of having the conversations and just continuing to ask the questions, so that and also sharing your experiences and how you got to where you are, and all these the valuing others and feeling valued,
And
and
still
the
taking other people
whys.
into taking people into account, because it isn't all about you.
Right.
Other people's opinions, you can't say they don't matter, but maybe you
Right.
need to have a crucial conversation to unpack it with that other person, because it isn't as easy as saying, okay, you value me. You have to work at that. Every
Totally.
relationship is
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, and some more than others,
Right.
because if your core values are completely different, then I'm sure finding those, valuing them and them valuing you, is going to be a little bit harder to come to that common ground.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Interesting. I think I agree with you about millennials too. I think they're a lot more thoughtful, and younger, like the under 40. I'm just gonna say they're um, I you know I think they're gonna be fine. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and some of them are the under 40s and younger. And I went to a lunch and learn yesterday via Zoom, and I'm telling you, that girl probably wasn't 22. And I remember thinking, I was so impressed. I'm just sitting here, and she's
Right.
got it together. So it was fun. I enjoyed it. Okay, another question we had is, happiness cliche, or should people be striving for a life purpose? What a good question.
I have an opinion about that. I know you're shocked. Only because I think a lot about, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Go ahead. I'm still thinking,
Okay.
because I'm like,
So
what do
I
I
think about
think?
this one a lot, back to my research, or my thinking, and having this be my passion project, because I'm going to use Garrett. And
Yeah,
it's not just him, but since I'm picking
yeah,
on him today, I'll keep picking on him.
yeah.
And
For
but
Garrett.
he's always, what's my life purpose? What am I here for? And uh, I would tell you, I become a firm believer that if you constantly focus on your happiness factor, so the answer to that is repeat, 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 because it's just like you finding life purpose doesn't have to be one big thing. Really, what life purpose is that you're you're bringing out the best in you and what you were put on this world for. And we all have our unique talents, and it could be a whole combination of small things. You know, I think
Right.
about my friend who, when her dad died, everybody from every department at the grocery store came because he was he impacted all their lives. The guy who ran the elevator at the department store. So did people say in his obituary he got the Pulitzer Prize? He made a multi-million-dollar business. No, he served his life's purpose because of all these people he touched, because repeat, repeat, repeat on being your best you. And sometimes they turn into big things, and sometimes they're accumulation of small things. But I think people get too caught up in saying, I got to find this one big thing that's out there. And in the meantime, it's back to that inertia, because you're trying to get the big, are you really working on the repeat? And you're not opening yourself up to finding that because you're not working on it on a daily basis. Does that make sense?
Right. I completely agree. I think that life purpose feels really big and like, and like you said, your life purpose could just be continually reaching out to people, building relationships, and connecting people. There's somebody I remember who I read a book, and I can't remember if it's Carnegie or Schwab, maybe it was Schwab, who was a connector, and he was an introducer. That's what, I can't remember who it was, but anyway, through his life, every week he made an intention to connect to people, because he would identify a need with somebody and somebody else who could help. And so he was constantly connecting people. And if, like, that wouldn't be a big life purpose, but through the years, it
Impactful.
became a huge network.
Right.
And all of these people, were like, all connected because of this one person. And and that's just something small that brought him joy and increased probably his happiness factor through the weeks, but wasn't really life purpose. You know what I mean?
And it might even be
So,
the perfect job that you're impacting a lot of people because you are in your zen, you're doing your thing. So
right,
the other side of the happiness factor, you shouldn't be wasting your time doing things that make you unhappy. And people spend too much time continually doing the same thing over and over again.
right,
And if you respected that and respected yourself, you'd walk away sooner, which I'm not really good at. You'd walk away sooner, and you would keep exploring, and you would be able, you'd make yourself open to you opening up your company and saying, wow, this is it. It's a continual process, and it's knowing when to walk away too,
right,
or knowing
right.
when to reinvent, knowing when to try something new. And you're going to have a much higher chance of finding that, wow,
Right.
not only I'm getting value because I'm really good at this, and
Yeah.
I'm really passionate about this, and I'm ultimately impacting other people, in
Yeah.
a different way.
Yeah. 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 And that happiness cliche, um, you know, yeah, if you're measuring yourself against other people, and I think you could fall into that, I need to be happy like them type of thing. So anyway, yeah, that's a good question. Hmm. All good things to think about.
Exactly.
I
We can
always
talk and
actually
talk and
I love talking to you because I always come away with some things to ponder.
get off the
It's
hamster wheel if it's not working, and at least break it
right.
down and say,
Break it down.
can I
Yeah.
tweak it? Can I have conversations? How can I make it better? Or do I need to take a completely different path? Am I doing something that is, back to me working, working with that was going to go nowhere. And
Yeah.
in fact, it actually had a negative impact because I stopped I will look back and blame myself because I was so caught up in that, between not being valued and that core value, that I stopped valuing others that were part of the team and would almost cut them off. It has a reverse effect all the way around. So I was to blame too, but it was a circle to nowhere, and it was better for all parties to move on.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in those situations too. And it's sometimes hard to walk away, but then if it's not aligned with your core values,
And you can't make somebody care more than you do. You can't make somebody value you. You can't. You know, that's
yeah,
the free will. There's things, that's the uncontrollables. Is humans have a need, and there's a whole article about, what people, there's a great about homelessness, and people think, oh, we're going to give them bags because they need stuff. No, they're core human needs, and one need is to be valued, they want their life to matter,
right,
and that's a core human value. You can't make somebody value you, but as a human, there's no human, be as cliche as happiness is, it's a core human need to be valued,
right,
to matter.
right. Okay, I have a whole string of questions going along that line, but I know we need to wrap it up because I was like, oh my gosh, where I could go with that whole piece, just being valued and the perception versus the reality,
Right.
and anyway, I'm not going to
And
go
how
there.
you can control that. If you can't make somebody value, how do you help somebody? Yeah, that's a whole.
I know.
And then you got to be in a space, because if you're marginalized, if you have a lot of this going on, how do you lift somebody up and help them? That's a whole other conversation.
Right.
Okay.
We got to go somewhere else with this. So this is great. So Sammy, Sandy, I called you Sammy. Sorry, Sandy. What are you doing with this happiness project, this happiness factor? You're calling it happiness factor. Are you, because I know you've been working on this for a big period of time. Are you doing training on it, coaching on it, writing? You're writing a book, right?
I am.
Good.
I am. I'm writing a book on it. Like I said, I'm writing a book for my mom too, and mom comes first. So I kind of go back.
Oh, good.
But I'm actually going to be having some individual workshops with the pandemic, and there's different variations. I've got the happiness factor, I've got the power of value, and I've got the success factor. I'm not going to get into it because there's different. It depends on what the goal is. Happiness factor is actually great for, let's say there's a book club of women right now, back to COVID, and you want to do something a little bit different and want to do a 2-part session with that same group, and to deep dive into the equation and how to get your arms around your own DNA, which is the whys and the hows, getting the tool set and having a conversation with others. So there are workshops. I'm going to be kicking off some virtual workshops. I had some on site, and we moved to Durango January 1st of this year, and had a couple workshops. The first one was kicking off. I finally got everything, the content going, and really very excited about it. Was March 23rd. And so we know where that went. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I like the conversations, back to unwinding. I do some speaking, and the happiness factor is one of those. I'm trying to convert my speech and my presentation to be more of a virtual. So I'm trying to take what I had and what I built back to the content and make it into our new normal world. But I'm excited, and a lot of those things will be kicking off here soon, and I'll talk it all day long with whoever wants to, because the more I learn and the more content I have, it's from stories and what works and what doesn't work with others, because we all learn from each other.
Yeah, totally. I think that's great. And I'll talk all day with you about it. But I know we got to wrap it up. Okay. So let's do our wrap question. The wrap question is, what's your guilty pleasure? Oh my gosh, I have so many. Did I talk about Zac Efron last time?
No,
Oh, I didn't?
no.
Okay, he has a show on Netflix. And I think I hear my daughter laughing at me in the background. He's got a show on Netflix. It's adorable. Well, he's adorable, but he travels the world and it's about some sustainability and there's food and healthy eating and things like that. And it's just really a good TV show, a
Really?
good show. Yeah, it's so I I really enjoy it, and again, he's adorable. And so to me that feels very guilty because I think he's so adorable. But I have many other guilty pleasures that I've discovered during this pandemic because, I have some time to fill. So what about you?
You know, I would back to having many cooking, and we talked about that, and reading, but I'll tell you, it's probably movies as an art form.
Movies.
And
Oh yeah.
similar to like anything that makes me talk, makes me think, talk. So I love the indie movies. They don't have to have a happy ending. They don't have to be a big blockbuster. So the Film Streams of Omaha, loved it. I'd go to every
Mhm.
movie they had. I'd go by myself. I'd catch everyone. Boise at a theater called Flicks. I went to the Durango Film Festival. So to give you an idea,
Yeah.
last year I saw 100 movies in the movie theater. And people are like, "How do you have
Wow.
time?" But I don't watch TV. Now back to your point, Amy. Uh, because the theaters aren't opened, what is good is I can get some down. Oh, subtitle, I'm all over it. Lucky Grandma was one I watched this week and it was great. Chinatown's all subtitled, great. Usually, if the
Nice.
critics like it and the fans are okay, I'll love it.
Have
Um,
you done Parasite?
yes,
Yeah, that
I
was a
saw
good
that
one.
right away. And so
We
when the
saw that in the
Oscars
theater. It was really good.
came out, um, I had seen every movie other than a few of the animation that was up for any award.
Nice.
Is that bad?
Nice.
But now I'm getting
No.
into the streaming because back to filling that, I miss my brother because he and I would go to the movies together and we'd find ourselves a day later texting about something or meaning or what did you think about this? And I
Yeah.
love entertainment, things that are very entertaining, but same with books, but that make me, they're enjoyable, they make me think, they make me talk. They don't all have to be a happy ending. I like good murder mysteries and a
Yeah.
romance here and there, and same with movies. But yeah, that's my guilty pleasure. Um,
Yeah. Good for you. Um, Another thing I did, I watched Hamilton a few times
yep.
last month because it came out on Disney Plus. And the last time I watched it, I turned on the subtitles. And that was a game changer for me
Oh,
because some of it goes so fast that you miss um, the quality of the writing because they're singing it so quick. And so I really, when something fast was coming on and I'm like, what are all the words to this? I was reading it. I was like,
that's a great idea. I'm gonna have to
it
do
was
that.
really, it was good. I enjoyed it. And I'm still humming Hamilton. And then there's a Muppets Hamilton too that my kids were sharing with me yesterday. If you want
They're
to,
gonna do.
you want to go there.
There's a Broadway show about Princess Diana that was supposed to be
Oh
released.
yeah,
Did you read that? And
I
it,
did.
because of the pandemic, it wasn't. And its very first release is going to be on Netflix
I saw
before you
that
get to the
today.
theater.
Yeah.
And I'm like, good. These actors, they're going to do everything, uh, social, whatever. They're going to follow
Yeah.
the rules. Uh, not quite sure what that means, but
Right.
it is fun to see different industries trying to innovate and
I agree.
keep people going, and I'm all here to support them. And I miss going to plays. I love local. I love local.
Hmm.
I love plays. I love musicals and local playhouses and going to different performances and the concert hall. And I do miss all that. And I feel
Yeah.
bad for the performers because they don't have that.
And I do think, to that note, there's going to be so much innovation that comes out of this period of time because of all the situations we're getting put into that are, I hate to say the word unprecedented, but the unprecedented. And like today was my youngest, his first day of his senior year. And I know they are doing so much to make this work for the kids, whether it's remote or in person. They're being thoughtful, they're being innovative, and they're just trying to do the best by the kids and the teachers.
Right.
So anyway, it's kind of, I agree, there's going to be some innovation, and hopefully it's the same for all this Broadway and plays and theater, all that stuff.
Awesome.
So much good stuff. All right.
Are we ready to wrap?
Yeah, next episode. I am so excited about the next episode. Why do I say that every week?
I'm excited too. We talk about other things, conversations, so we always have to tell each other, stop talking about it. Save it for conversation.
Right.
Just so everybody knows, we start talking about things before our new one. It's like, no, hold that thought.
Right. Time out. Don't talk about it. Okay, so next one is own your shit. So this is going to be a little about, owning up to what's going on and what your responsibility is and what role you're playing in the stuff that's happening in your life.
It's the opposite of the blame game. Own your shit, baby. My kids have heard that so many times, or it's a characteristic I really admire in people. How about that?
Right. I do too. When people can step up and say,
because we all have it.
I made a mistake. We all make mistakes. Yep. Totally. Okay, we're going to stop talking about this so we can save it for next time.
Wonderful day.
Thank you. It was fun.
Next time. Bye-bye.
All right. Talk to you later.